to a free press, to an informed citizenry, to an America where freedom and democracy endure. God bless America.
I've seen that toast a bunch of times, but it landed very differently this year, because depending on what happens in November, 7 months from right now, this time next year, I might not be sitting here. There might not be a White House Correspondents' Dinner or a free press. While our democracy wouldn't exactly fall apart immediately without it, the real threat looms larger. A candidate with outward disdain, not just for a free press, but for all of our freedoms and for the rule of law itself.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about the cackling hens on The View. More specifically, we got to talk about the dumbest cackling hen, Whoopi Goldberg, who is going to have a meltdown over the fact that Trump acknowledged that there is an anti-white feeling in the United States, okay? So Trump is acknowledging the truth about the anti-whiteness, the overt anti-whiteness that comes from the left, okay? And I want to talk about it because this brings up a very fascinating conversation about the anti-white feeling that, you know, is prevalent in the United States. I mean, again, it's overt. It comes from the left versus the left's complaints about the so-called anti-blackness and the racism in this country that they claim comes from the right, because there's a big difference, right? And again, the difference is the overtness of it, right? How in your face it is when it comes from the left versus the left claiming that, hey, when it comes from the right, they have to jump through a lot of hoops in order to actually get there. And I want to explain to you guys what I'm talking about here. But first, I want to play this reaction from Whoopi, who, again, is upset that Trump is speaking some truth about the anti-white agenda of the left. So without further ado, let's get into it.
This.
The dreaded.
In a new interview released this morning, you know who told Time magazine what he would do if he gets back in the White House. Things like this. He's going to let states monitor a woman's pregnancy.
Yeah.
So basically, he's going to allow states to, I don't know, enact their laws when it comes to abortion, to follow the laws that people voted for when they go and they vote for a representative and they say, hey, you know, I want my state to be a pro-life state, or, you know, I want my state to be a pro-choice state. Apparently, that's a bad thing. The left hates federalism. It's something that they've shown ever since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. They don't like states' rights, okay? They don't like states being able to decide things for themselves when it comes to issues like abortion.
Think about that.
Yeah.
He's going to deploy the military to deport migrants.
I love that. I don't think these people realize that they're actually campaigning on behalf of Trump when they come out here and talk about what he wants to do. Okay, because we definitely need a mass deportation. In fact, we need the military at the border as well, too. If we could get mass deportations by the military and the military at the border, bruh, Trump's presidency by default will be a success, right? If he actually does these things, which I hope he does, okay? I hope he does. I'm just saying, I don't think that these people realize when they come out here and they talk about the things that Trump wants to do, that they're really making them sound good, right? They're making them sound better, okay? It's just fascinating. And then they wonder why Trump's poll numbers continue to go up despite the Trump derangement from the media, because the media does a great job at selling Trump to the American people.
Mexicans are going to pay for it.
And he's going to absolutely consider pardoning January 6 rioters.
Of course.
I mean, hey, I don't understand what's so bad about releasing nonviolent protesters. Does Whoopi not believe in free speech? Again, considering how a vast majority of the January 6 protesters were not violent, and they're being thrown in cages simply for expressing their dissatisfaction with the outcome of the election. Again, it's just so crazy to me how the left has shown, especially recently, how they really don't like free speech in this country, especially when it goes against the left-wing agenda.
Now, he was also asked if he thinks there will be political violence if he loses, and he answered, it depends.
Well, almost certainly if Biden wins, right? If Biden wins, we're going to see a lot of violence from the left in these liberal cities, because these people are going to lose their mind at the fact that Trump will be their president again, okay? We know for a fact, almost certainly, that's what will happen if Trump wins, okay? If Biden loses, the left will lose their mind. If you think what's happening with the pro-Palestine riots are bad right now, just wait and see what happens if Biden loses. At this point, I mean, it's about when, right? And if you pay attention to the polls, it seems like if the election was held today, Trump would destroy Biden. But I'm just saying, if Trump wins, these people are going to lose their minds. They're not going to be able to stand it, okay? We saw violent protests happen when Trump won in 2016. We saw violent protests happen when Trump appointed justices like Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. We know that these people tend to lash out and commit acts of violence when they don't get their way when it comes to Trump. I'm just saying, that's who you should be concerned about.
Is he referring to something he was wearing?
You're on fire already.
You know? So is this, I mean, there's also, this is my favorite.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you before I say it that it enraged me. There is a definite anti-white feeling in the country right now.
Oh, please.
Yeah, that's what he said. You know, sir.
No. Sir.
Yeah, sir. Nobody in your family was hung. Nobody in your family was chased because of the color of their skin. How dare you? There's no anti-white issue here. You are perpetrating anti-humanist issues here.
Yeah, so I bet that Whoopi hasn't had any relatives that have been hung because they're black or chased because they're black either, right? I think it's so funny how these people just assume that white people have never had ancestors that have been subject to lynchings or being hung, when 27% of the people that were lynched between 1882 and 1968 were white, okay? And a lot of these white people that were lynched because they were Republican, because they were fighting for civil rights, because they were anti-lynching, okay? So to just assume that, you know, a white person can't have relatives that have been hung or lynched or whatever is just ignorant, right? Again, considering how there is a history of lynching white people in this country, again, for various reasons, whether that be because, again, they're fighting for equal rights or racial equality, or because, you know, they're criminals or thieves or whatever, right? But the reason why Whoopi is so triggered by his statement is because you have a former president of the United States acknowledging something that politicians are scared to acknowledge, which is that, yes, there is an overt anti-white sentiment in this country. Okay, and the reason why you know that is because we have policies in place that are overtly anti-white. Like, for example, we had affirmative action up until the Supreme Court overruled it and said, yeah, affirmative action is racist and it is not constitutional to discriminate against people based off race. Now, again, who were the victims of the discrimination from affirmative action? Whites and Asians. Okay, so we do know for a fact, based off this Supreme Court ruling, that we have had laws in this country or policies in this country that are overtly anti-white. Now, they've essentially kind of moved on from affirmative action, and now the corporate version of affirmative action is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which again is overtly anti-white. Now, again, this is the difference between when somebody calls out the anti-whiteness in this country versus when people call out the anti-blackness or any other form of bigotry that they see when the right does something or advocates for some policy that they disagree with. They have to extrapolate and jump through a few hoops mentally in order to get to that conclusion. Because again, DEI, affirmative action, overtly, okay, they are explicitly designed to discriminate against whites, right? That's the whole reason they exist, to take away power, the perceived advantages of white people in society, right? But again, when the left boohoo whines and cries racism, okay, when it comes to the right, they do so based off things like, for example, wanting to be tough on crime. They say, well, if you want to be tough on crime, if you want to lock up criminals, that means you're racist against blacks, right? Because it just so happens that, hey, you know, black people disproportionately commit more of the crimes. Therefore, they're going to be subject to being locked up more, right? But again, they think that you are targeting people because they're black not necessarily because they're criminals, even though you're not targeting people based off race. It's not overtly racial. It's just based off your own behavior when it comes to the border. If you say, hey, we should have a secure border, we should not just be allowing illegals to invade the country. They say, well, you must hate Latino people, right? You must hate brown people, okay? Black and brown people that are trying to come into the country. Again, it has nothing to do with hating people because of their skin color, their race, or anything like that. It has to do strictly with enforcing our border policies, right? Making sure we can't just have anybody, whether they be white, black, brown, whoever, just come up in the country without knowing who they are, right? Just like when it comes to locking up criminals, that also includes white criminals, okay? Which there are, quite a bit of white criminals because white people are majority of the population. So you're going to have a lot of white criminals too. So again, none of these things are overtly discriminatory against any race or people, anything like that. They're just common sense policies that the left boohoo whines and cries and says, oh, well, it's racist. And because of these policies, they say that, well, this country is anti-black or so-called anti-people of color, and nobody ever pushes back against that, even though, again, there are no policies on the books that call for overt discrimination against black people or brown people, the same way that you could point at something like an affirmative action that essentially is overt discrimination against whites, or DEI, which is overt discrimination against whites as well too. And that's the difference. And yes, I know there are some woke revolutionaries, they'll say something like, well, what about sentencing disparities or redlining? Well, first and foremost, when you talk about sentencing disparities, things like, for example, the disparity between crack and cocaine when it comes to sentencing, you can thank Democrats for that, right? You can thank Joe Biden for that more specifically. When it comes to redlining, you can also thank Democrats, but that doesn't exist anymore because it's irrelevant. And when it comes to the alleged sentencing disparities, that is also being rectified. We can still argue that there are probably some disparities that are anti-black in the criminal justice system, but hey, if you're not a criminal, then it's likely that you're not going to have to deal with those things, okay? I'm just saying the best way to not deal with it is don't commit crimes. Somebody asked me a question on X a couple days ago about whether or not, there is white victimhood in this country in regards to, people like Tucker Carlson coming out and talking about what's happening in regards to the overt anti-white sentiment that's coming from the Democrat Party. And I think the answer to that question is it just depends. If you're a white person and you're coming out here and you're saying that you can't succeed because you're white or you're being held back because you're white, yes, I think that's a form of victimhood. The same way I would think that if you are black and you come out here and say you're being held back because you're black is a form of victimhood as well too. However, I will say that the difference is that, yes, I think as a straight white Christian male, there is an overt attack on the power that white males have traditionally had in this country. And with that being said, again, that's how you get the policies like an affirmative action or a DEI. It's just the fact that the left is trying to take down what they see as the power structure that upholds the white male patriarchy. And to get deeper than that, it's not about just taking down the white male patriarchy simply because they're white males. It's really more about capitalism, okay? Because they see the white male patriarchy as the pillar of capitalism, okay? That is what a lot of the woke revolutionaries are upset about. And this is why, again, they target the straight white Christian male, because they see him as the, again, pillar of what upholds the capitalist system. In order to take down capitalism, you have to essentially dethrone the straight white male from their power. And this is why it's super important to note that when you talk about the overt anti-white discrimination or the overt anti-white rhetoric in this country, a vast majority of it is coming from white leftists. Because again, it's not really about your skin color as much as about taking down capitalism and trying to usher in Marxism, communism. This is what they actually really want. And this is why the leftists have moved on from using socioeconomic status as justification for socialist policies. And now they weaponize race in order to do so. They come out and say, well, we need universal health care because the current healthcare system is racist towards black women. Okay. Or we need to raise the minimum wage because, it's discriminatory against blacks. This is what we call cultural Marxism, okay? I mean, the oppressed and the oppressed are not based off social economic status anymore. It's based off color. But the end goal ultimately is the same, which again, is to usher in communism, right? So it is a fact if you come out here and say, well, hey, yeah, I mean, there is an overt kind of agenda against white males in this country. That actually is a fact. Now, again, I don't think that's a form of victimhood to acknowledge that, because we have overt proof and evidence to support that claim. Again, just look at affirmative action, DEI, turn on MSNBC, and they're talking all types of trash about white males in ways that you would never see Fox News come out and do overtly about blacks. Fox News, again, if they aired some of the anti-white rhetoric on their network, but they said it about black folks, Fox News wouldn't be allowed on air, right? I mean, that channel would be banned, okay? They would ban it. But again, they allow it on MSNBC, and it just shows you how it has become acceptable in this country to demonize people based off race if you're white, okay? But if you're any other race or skin color or whatever, you can't do that, again, which is a part of the anti-white feeling in this country that Trump is talking about, okay? This is something that we all observe, but again, like always, the left wants to try to piss on your leg and tell you that it's raining. They deny the reality of what is happening in this country.
So the question is he the future? Is he the future? Well, I gotta ask.
Yeah.
You know, that's the gig. They pay me.
So I read this big time interview this morning, and it's Trump in his own words saying these scary things. But I was
Nothing that he said was scary. Nothing that he said was scary. Again, Alyssa Fair Griffin, as a so-called conservative, claiming that mass deportations are scary. It tells you everything you need to know about how she's not a conservative. Like, there's an effort to try to basically bring the Republican Party to the left, all the way to the left, where you have people like Michael Steele, Joe Scarborough, Alyssa Fair Griffin, who are no different than Democrats, coming out here and still claiming to be Republicans or conservatives while not supporting any conservative policies. Again, it blows my mind, and it's very frustrating because you're not a conservative. Just come out and say, hey, I'm liberal, right? I'm liberal now, and that's it. But don't try to drag conservatism to the left. This is what these people are trying to do. That is the point of somebody like an Alyssa Fair Griffin, is because her whole role is to basically try to cause confusion between what it actually really means to be conservative versus liberal. Essentially, she is a liberal posing as a conservative to try to drag conservatism to the left, right? This is how they shift the Overton window to the left. This is why we now have a Democrat Party that is progressive. Okay, they're not center left. Okay, they're not classical liberals. These people are just flat out leftists. They're leftists. And again, having somebody like an Alyssa Fair Griffin come out here and basically try to pretend like mass deportations are somehow some extremist agenda, again, tells you everything you need to know. She's not conservative.
as taken aback as I should be, because for the last 4 years, myself, others who spoke out against him have been saying literally line by line what he's saying in his own words in this piece. And it is devastating to me that that is not resonating with Republicans, a party I've been a member of my whole life, that they're just not believing it. The other day, Bill Barr, the former attorney general, was asked about something I had stated where Trump said that somebody should be executed because they leaked a bad story about him. And he basically was like, I don't recall that. But on other occasions, he said stuff like that. But we shouldn't take him literally. No, the things he says we should take literally. And I've said this 1,000 times. There won't be guardrails next time. There won't be Mark Esper. There won't be John Kelly. There won't.
I guarantee you, Biden says much worse things in the White House, but yet the mainstream liberal media won't report on it. I guarantee you they'll never report on it. Again, trying to take what a president says in a moment of anger, something that he never acted on or even attempted to act on, right, is one thing if they said, well, Trump ordered the execution of X, Y, and Z individual. That's a whole different thing. If he actually came out and made that order. But something that the president says, allegedly says, because we don't even know if he actually said it. Again, we, take this with a grain of salt. It's probably not true, right? But even if he did say it, okay, he said that in a moment of anger. Again, I guarantee you, based off reports of Biden's bad temper in the White House, that he says worse things, okay? But again, only Trump is held to this impossible standard. Where now all of a sudden they want to pretend like, oh God, this guy is such a big danger to do things that he never did when he was in office. He never even attempted to do. It's amazing.
Be dramatic. That article. He says he's going to only hire loyalists and people who say that the last election is stolen. So he's admitting he's going to staff a White House and the entire federal government with either liars or lunatics. It is very scary, and I just want to underscore, because I want Trump to lose. He and Joe Biden are neck and neck. It is very real that in 7 months we will wake up to President-elect Donald Trump, and that should be scary for every American.
Wow. A conservative saying that it is scary to have Trump become president again. Even though he did none of these things that these people keep fear-mongering about. When he was initially president, World War III did not happen. There were no executions. Okay, he didn't even lock up Hillary, which he gets a lot of backlash for, by the way, right? At the time, Trump said, no, that would be a very, very, very bad thing, okay, to lock up your political opponent, even though I said it on the campaign trail. I think, kind of looks like Trump was a little bit too soft on Hillary, right? In hindsight, looking at it today, considering how Democrats aren't hesitating to try to lock him up, even though he was graceful towards them. And I think what they're afraid of is because of political persecutions against Trump, Trump is not going to be so graceful this time around, right? And that's why these people are fear-mongering so much. But I think a lot of the American people realize that this fear-mongering is very overblown. Okay, and it's to the point where it is comical. And that's why you're seeing Trump's poll numbers continue to go up despite all the fear-mongering and the Trump derangement, because the American people realize that that's what it is. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.